He's John Timpane.
And he's Don Rooney.
And this is
The Musical Innertube.
Now, you may ask, why is this podcast called The Musical Innertube?
And we may reply, because that's its name, of course.
Now, how did this podcast get that name?
Back in college, we hosted a radio show. Once, we tried to introduce a soothing musical interlude.
Instead, we messed up and wound up introducing a soothing musical innertube, and the name stuck.
So here we are, hundreds of years later, still talking
to interesting people about their interesting lives.
Difference makers who really make a difference.
Today, we welcome back to the Musical Innertube our pal and frequent guest, Art Caplan. We're always happy to have him on. Art is one of the country's most prominent medical ethicists and one of our most influential commentators on what's going on in our medical and public health arenas. He is the Doctors William F. and Virginia Connolly Mitty Professor and founding head of the Division of Medical Ethics at the NYU Grossman School of Medicine in New York City. Welcome back to the Musical Innertube, Art Caplan.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Hey, Art, I'm going to start you off with one of the touchiest subjects around nowadays, and that is the abortion. But specifically, I know we've talked about it in previous shows, but specifically, I want to go to that situation with that woman in Texas. Every doctor that she talked to told her that not only was her baby not going to survive, possibly not birth, but certainly not long afterwards, but she also wanted to preserve her uterus for future children. And she was told by the doctors, if you don't have this fetus aborted or taken care of, you're risking having future children. So this is not a woman who is by any means having an abortion on a whim. She's gone through a lot of problems with it. She went to the courts. A lower court said, yes, you can have your abortion. The Texas Supreme Court said no. And the reason they gave was something about the fact that the doctors couldn't make a medical proof that she needed the abortion, which I think was the basis of her whole problem. Anyway, she wound up having to go out of state to have the abortion. But I think that underlines something that we had talked about earlier, and that is the legislation is so vague that anybody can interpret it any way they want.
Well, this is, I think her name was Katie Cox.
Right.
Yes.
And she is very much a person who wants a family, wants kids. She said a number of times she could never see herself seeking or asking for an abortion. So we're not talking about a case where someone is just, controlling their reproduction by use of abortion, although that has happened, but this is far from that. Her doctors in Texas basically said, if you want to preserve your fertility to have more kids, we think it best if you have an abortion, preserve your reproductive system and start to try again. Plus, should this fetus die in your body, it's threatening to you, and that could happen. No guarantee it would, but it could. I'm going to say this. When Dobbs was announced as a Supreme Court opinion, I think a lot of people who are anti-abortion felt this is great, and now we will see the country move kind of lockstep toward restricting abortions. But we haven't seen that. What we've seen instead is state after state, even some red ones like Kansas, Ohio, start to say, we want to carve out some space for certain areas, examples where abortion might be chosen. And I think the case of Katie Cox is one of those. You've got a case where she wants kids, she wants to maximize her chance to have kids, she's worried about her own health. I don't know why the Texas Supreme Court felt that, they couldn't figure out if she was at risk. Her doctor said she was at risk. Again, this is a case where you've got judges playing doctor, and I don't think that's a good thing to do. The Texas Attorney General went nuts and said, I'll, charge everybody in sight if they perform an abortion. My response to that might have been, go for it. We're going to do it anyway. We have to do what's in our patient's best interest. And I'd be happy to litigate this one in the state of Texas. And as a defense, say she needs to preserve her life. She needs to preserve her fertility. I think they had the case. She decided apparently to go out of state. So that's been the resolution. But the lessons, I think, are many. One is not all abortions are the same. So if you're going to save the life of the mother, which I would concede is not a frequent need in the world of abortion, but it comes up, I think most Americans are going to go for that. If you're in a situation where the fetus is dying and can't live, and you say it's born, sadly, without its brain, which is called anencephaly, I think you want to end that pregnancy and let the couple start trying again. So severe fetal anomalies or defects incompatible with life, hard to argue there that you have to deliver that child either to more suffering or dead. And you've got situations, the old rape and incest problems, where a lot of people would say it's not the fetus's fault. I get that, but the woman may just say, I am not carrying to term the product of a incestuous rape, that I'm not doing that that's my right not to have to do that. So I think you've got to wedge out some space for some forms of abortion. The other difficulty that's on the horizon, sorry to give a speech on this, I'll shut up in a minute. The other form of abortion that's up for grabs soon is the use of day after abortion pills. So again, you've got some conservatives saying, well, we're going to make sure that abortions don't take place. About half of them are now pharmaceutical, not surgical at all. Women are saying, I should be able to get medicine through telemedicine from wherever I want. I think you'll see that this attempt to restrict abortion pills that some states are thinking about is going to run up against some pretty powerful opponents. They're called FedEx, UPS. The big delivery companies don't want the government saying you can't ship X. It's like free speech in the media. They hate that. They don't like that at all. Behind the scenes, I'm sure they're agitating like crazy to say, don't tell me I can't ship contraceptives or whatever controversial product it might be. So I think we're in a situation where critics of abortion, critics of Roe versus Wade said, let the states decide. But now we're getting answers that strong anti-abortion proponents don't like. And we're not really willing to leave it to the states to decide.
I'm interested in situations where legislatures, arrogate to themselves decisions that should be made by doctors. I don't know if there's a solution to that because legislatures make laws, but they do seem to be doing things rather without regard to what the facts might be. And I don't know if there's a solution. What do you think? Well,
first of all, the basis for trying to overturn the day after abortion pill availability is that a judge in the Fifth Circuit down in Texas said he wasn't convinced that the FDA regulatory process was adequate. Well, the FDA regulatory process has been in place for about 20 years. It's been reviewed, I think, 4 times, that drug. He's in no position to challenge that. He did. Is it within his authority to challenge? I don't even think it is. I think it just says, if you let that stand, the FDA goes out the window, and that's not a place we want to be because they certainly gave that pill more looks for safety, quote unquote, adverse events if you take it for the mom than almost anything I can think of. So there's some bad illustrations of legislatures and judges jumping into the science and the medicine. I'll tell you what I haven't heard enough is complaining from organized medicine, professional groups and so on, basically saying, you are out of your lane, this is wrong. And even to some extent saying, let's take a case like that case in Texas. Let's litigate it. You think, Attorney General, that there isn't enough evidence to say that this woman her health is at risk or that her fertility is at risk? I mean, let's litigate some of these. So I think it's time for organized medicine, AMA, American College of Internal Medicine, American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology. Let's go to court and fight this. You might say, well, you're not going to fight it in Texas. at the court level. They've already shown that they'll back up anti-abortion sentiment. I still think let's haul them into court, show the light of day, show that the evidence isn't on the side of the pronouncement against this woman, that the doctors do know what they're talking about. And I'm almost ready to say, take it up to the Supreme Court. If we want a society that ignores science in its public policy, then at least we should know that that's where they're going to be. And then you try to pass, if you will, legislation to get around that.
One other thing I want to bring up, and then I think we can move on, is you had mentioned in Ohio and in Kansas and in other places where it's been put to a popular vote, people of all ages, all sexes, all parties have backed having abortion available, saying it's more of a healthcare issue than a legislative issue. Also, I've noticed that the anti-abortion people have used some tricks to get things, like they go to that judge in Texas that they know is going to rule in their favor, and they file the case there as opposed to anywhere else. So I think we might be talking about something where the people who, thanks to Dobbs, now have, the law on their side, quote unquote, are still kind of sneaking around the back door to get it done. And meanwhile, the popular vote is this shouldn't be done at all.
So weirdly, I never thought this would be true, but the greatest vulnerability of Trump and the MAGA side is abortion. If women, well, people, but women in particular, really get angry, say you're sneaking around behind our backs, you're trying to say you can't put something on a, state amendment, popular opinion vote, because they don't like the way it's going to come out. Remember, they were playing with that in Ohio. Yeah. I think you could actually lose the election over this issue, which is something I never would have predicted.
It'll be interesting. And we're going into this year, which I thought that 2020 was Armageddon. This is Armageddon plus super plus, deluxe. It's these questions, which are so basic, that you didn't think we'd have to return to. It seems like voters may well be motivated. We'll see. Our next chapter here is not only a medical ethics discussion that we can have, but also it might be the number one business story for 2023, which is the crazy success of something called semaglutide. And it's known by a lot of names. Rybelsus, Wegovy, Ozempic is, I think, the most popular one. And I believe you can tell me if I'm wrong, Art. Didn't this start as a treatment for diabetes?
Yes.
And then so really what's happened is a huge rush to use it to treat for weight loss, or at least to promote weight loss. So it's on the label, but it's sort of a side use. It began as something else, and suddenly it looks like it really works. And certainly in the United States of America, where people have the means and the money, it will be popular. I wonder what you see, because obviously there has been a huge rush to this compound. Obviously, it's helped a lot of people. Well, what are the issues that you see with it? What's going on with Ozempic?
Well, it is one of the great business success stories of the year. Can't make it fast enough. Can't even get it out to the population that needs it the most, which is diabetes. They're having a hard time securing the supply because so many other people are getting a doctor to prescribe it for weight loss or weight maintenance.
That's so weird that, that the people who have the indicated condition are having to struggle to get it when it's become so popular for the side indication.
Yep. And not only is it that popular, the drug itself can be made in a pharmacy in a sort of solution salt form. And for reasons I don't even understand this world, but the FDA apparently will allow that to be made because they've approved the injectable form. And so there are people on the black market pushing this stuff. There are people going to wellness clinics and getting not the injectable, but something where you sort of mix it up and inject yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been overdoses already of this stuff. Mistakes of how much to give themselves. So that's quite the demand. When you get your own little side business, black market business running, I was trying to think if I had ever seen anything like I can't think of anything like this. So, is it a good drug? Yes. Apparently works, is efficacious. One thing we don't know, however, is what does it mean if you take it for 10 years because it hasn't been around that long? So
right.
It may have side effects that we don't know about. A second problem with it is not cheap if you don't get it at your wellness spa and brew it up yourself. It might be $1,000 a week.
Oh my gosh.
So you could easily see the entire healthcare budget being shot into people for weight loss or weight control. There's that many millions of people, tens of millions of people who could use it. Third issue, when do you start using it? There are plenty of obese kids. Putting them on it early? Or do we say, nope, the first step in this is to try and change your diet, maybe give you some more recess at school, maybe put you on a walking plan or something. Do we try to get a better lifestyle going? Or we just say, well, everybody will just inject this stuff, eat what you want, and don't worry about it. We kind of have given in with the adults. We're not basically saying, let's count calories, friends, or let's do some more non-sedentary stuff. I see Oprah's out there blessing the drug and basically saying, help me. I know she's working with Weight Watchers, which I just saw literally a few days ago, started a new program to work with people who are taking these drugs, which I find interesting. It's sort of like we're going to try and change your lifestyle. Well, we'll use the injectables to bring your weight down. It's not that that's inherently bad, but otherwise Weight Watchers is going to disappear.
Right.
Who's going to do that? Not in the adult form. Let me put the moral question a different way. I don't even know what you guys think about this, but is it best to say long-term, it's still lifestyle? Long-term, it's still better diet, exercise, better behavior, or it doesn't really matter. Take a shot once a week if we get the price down. Presumably we're not all going to go broke. And, that's just as good. There are certainly people, who are taking mood-altering anti-anxiety pills every day, and we don't say, oh, well, you should learn to manage that better, blah, 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 blah. So, part of me leans towards saying better lifestyle than being drug-dependent.
Yes.
But part of me also says lifestyle doesn't seem to work. Better being drug-dependent than getting hip replacements and getting diabetes and having all those healthcare costs.
Mm.
I know that I have the type 2 diabetes, which a lot of older Americans kind of graduate into. And I asked my family doctor at one point, why are so many people getting it? And he said, I can give you 3 reasons. And he says that it's kind of flip and it doesn't cover all of the bases. But they're McDonald's, Burger King, and KFC. Basically, the fact is that Americans are dependent on prepackaged food to a higher extent than they ever have been.
Yeah.
Not just in fast food, but even going to the grocery store. Everything's been prepackaged for you now. A lot of it's been pre-cooked. You can go and get a whole meal already done. You just bring it home and heat it. There are now obviously groups that will mail you a box full of pre-done food, and all you have to do is heat that up. And that contains preservatives, chemicals, other things that you don't get in a beet or a head of lettuce that you pick and wash. And a lot of those things have gone into packing the pounds on. And the Ozempic was supposedly to help diabetics' bodies cope with this influx of bad food, then the body could help it a lot. And of course, the side effect was, hey, you lose the weight. But I think probably that's the whole reason that we got into this in the first place. And again, being Americans, let's take a shot or a pill rather than walk around the block or, spend 5 minutes inside of an exercise place, because that's easier and that's the American way. So I don't know if that's, you're right. It all comes down to convenience versus being able to, right yourself. Because when people start eating right and exercising, quite frankly, they're looked at as nuts. They're the exercise nuts. They're the health food nuts. And they're kind of pushed off to the side. So, yeah, I think probably this is the American way. Take a shot.
Well, one group that has remained very quiet about where we are with managing weight and diet is the food industry. I haven't seen them say, come on into McDonald's and you'll get a free injectable, I haven't heard any comment at all. So they know the Pepsis, the Coca-Colas, the fast food joints, and our portion size, which, if anybody's ever been to Europe, is about a third of what we would get on the average meal. We're quiet. So we're not asking the food industry to change. We're not trying to get all the sugar out of all these products that are full of sugars and corn syrups. And instead, what we tend to do is put the onus for weight on the individual.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's exercise or why aren't you taking shots or why didn't you get the gastric bypass surgery or whatever. But I think you're right, Don. It's a mixed blame. I know I wrote an opinion piece just pre-COVID about driving home from NYU to Connecticut where I live, and I pass 16 fast food places.
Oh, yes. Do we know? I suppose it's been around since like 2017, this drug. So it's been around for about 6 years, but that's not a long, long time.
No.
So do we know do people, once they stop this drug, say they've been taking it for a few years and have lost, say, 20 pounds or so, which would be nice. Do they pack it on again? Do they know anything about that?
They do tend to come right back. The weight pounds come right back. So you haven't changed anything about your eating. You're slowing your metabolism down. It does give you a sense of feeling full more quickly, but you take that out of the way, it's the same 16 fast food joints on the way home challenge, and you didn't do any more exercise to accommodate this. So I'm going to say it's probably going to be lifetime usage. But again, we don't know what that really does
exactly
to us.
Right. And to our society. Oprah has made her body style part of her show over the decades. And I recall when she's lost a lot of weight 2 or 3 times. And she says she's doing it partly, and I think she's right, she's doing this partly to encourage other women who are looking ahead at, the long road to slimming with trepidation. I remember she once carted, I think it was 80 pounds of fat in a wheelbarrow onto the stage and said, "This is 80 pounds of fat. See what it looks like? I was carrying this stuff around with me everywhere I went." But back then when she did that, she was talking about dieting and exercising. She's now we switch and it's Ozempic.
Yeah.
I think she's going to get back to being slimmer because, at several points in her career, she's been very slim. On the other hand, it's been at several points in her career.
Yes.
There's been.
And so if you really tracked Weight Watchers or efforts to count calories or efforts to change diets, they don't have a great track record for being permanent either.
Alas, you just said what should not be said. Really keep it off. What keeps it off is continued discipline, continued weight watching.
Right. Ultimate temptation, right? You got more and more stuff proliferating everywhere that tastes good and is amply available, and for many people easy to get.
And yo-yo dieting was something that I remember hearing about a long, long time ago. And that's basically what this is that you diet and you get the pounds off. And then the minute you go off the plan, whatever that is, it all comes back because you haven't made that commitment to yourself for the long term. So
yeah, it could be, by the way, we should acknowledge this, that obesity in the U.S. is the biggest public health problem we've ever faced, including COVID and, hepatitis and maybe arguably polio. And it's cost in terms of premature death, disability is huge. It's just enormous. It really strains our healthcare system. Part of the reason we're so expensive is that we charge too much, or we accept charges on medications that are too high. Hospital charges are high, but we got enormous utilization.
Just the cost of surgery alone for replacing knees and hips is it's part of the knock-on effect. I'm not saying it's all caused by that. A lot of people, a lot of things just wear out, but it's more likely that you'll have some kind of surgery of that sort.
Exactly.
We'll return to our podcast in just a moment, but first, here's a soothing musical interlude.
Art Caplan is the doctors William F. and Virginia Connolly Mitty, professor and founding head of the Division of Medical Ethics at the NYU Grossman School of Medicine in New York City. Before that, Art was the Caplan Professor of Bioethics at the University of Pennsylvania Perelman School of Medicine in Philadelphia. There, he created the Center for Bioethics and the Department of Medical Ethics.
Art is the author of 35 books and 800 papers in peer-reviewed journals. His books include Vaccination Ethics and Policy, The Ethics of Sport, Replacement Parts, The Ethics of Procuring and Replacing Organs in Humans, and The Case of Terry Shavo, Ethics at the End of Life.
To learn more, see Art's page on the NYU Medical Faculty website at med.nyu.edu/faculty/Arthur-L-Caplan. And now, back to the musical Innertube, already in progress.
When we first started this, Art, this morning, you had mentioned the announcement of a genetic approach to the treatment of sickle cell anemia. And I'm wondering what you feel about that.
Well, we've been talking about cures that are going to come from our ability to map human genes. And we have learned that map first was announced in 1998, but we have learned since then that there are a number of diseases that are just one spelling mistake in the genome. So sickle cell, cystic fibrosis, these are examples of one single mistake in the DNA causing a bad or sometimes lethal disease. Recently, past 5 years, we came up with a kind of genetic scissors that can go in, snip out a portion of our DNA, or sometimes the next level of development, the RNA, and get rid of that bad gene. That's what was announced for sickle cell. Great. Good news. Finally have something. Sickle cell is a horrible disease. Just to distinguish it, sickle cell disease is when you have the mistake on both of your DNA spirals. Both messages carry the mutation, because we have two of everything except in the male Y chromosome. And that gives you a disease. When you only have one of the errors, that seems to confer some resistance to malaria, a mild form called sickle cell trait. That's why the thing is stuck around. It's got an advantage that you sort of tolerate the disease in a population, and it's primarily in African Americans because that's where malaria has been for a long time. We got rid of malaria, by the way, by spraying pesticide all over our nation. killing birds and nature and mosquitoes and everything else, but it did get rid of malaria. So we need it, and there's still people here who have the disease form of sickle cell. But here's the big but. Price tag on this genetic scissor solution, $2.3 million per case.
Oh my goodness, per case.
Per case. It's a rigmarole. You gotta take, our blood cells are made in our bone marrow. What you do is you pull out bone marrow from the patient, send it to a lab, genetically engineer it there, kill the rest of the bone marrow in the patient, put the new stuff back in and hope that it grows, now growing normal blood cells, or in some cases fetal blood, which also doesn't sickle, and you've cured the patient. That whole process takes about 3 or 4 months if it works. It's a whole rigmarole. It probably does cost a lot of money to do it. It's not made up that $2 million price tag, but it's clearly not going to be available to a lot of people right away. I don't know what insurance is going to do with it. Most sickle cell diseases are still in poor African countries. They're never seeing this, not just by price, but by send it off to a lab, genetically engineer it, kill your bone marrow with chemotherapy, put this back in, blah, blah, blah. So yes, there is a step forward, but I'm going to say, unlike most of the media coverage, baby step. Still very expensive, still very complex to do.
And that's a sad note because, as you mentioned, it mostly affects African Americans. And those are the people that have the greatest problem with healthcare.
So good news, we've got something to help them. A lot of the cures efforts and research haven't really focused on African Americans, but we kind of got an answer here because it's a single mutation disease, and that's exactly what CRISPR, this gene scissoring technique, can do. So yes, but the road to saying everybody with sickle cell disease is going to get cured using this is a long road.
Well, it's not the only announcement with genetic manipulation that we've had recently. Evidently, there's one now that may give, in the near future, at least parents more leeway to perhaps screen unborn children or fix them early, or other applications. Talk about that, because when I first read it, it seemed to me, wow, this is big. And it could be big. It could be the first step toward things that people have been talking about for years.
Yeah.
Both well and ill. Because, it obviously parents, I suppose, should have some superintendent's rights over, the future health of their children. The notion that the world should force people to have defective babies, well, it just doesn't make much sense to me, morally or ethically. But I'd like to hear your ideas about it, Bart.
So a company, Orchid Therapeutics, announced that they could use that gene mapping technology to map the entire 99.5% of the genes in a human embryo. So they can see them all. Great. Genetic testing of embryos in an infertility clinic where they're sitting in dishes up until now has probably covered 5% of the genes that they contain. So this is a huge leap. I'm thrilled about it because it's like the Future Full Employment Act for bioethicists. Really just talking about this for the next 25 years, easy. Why? Well, right now in an IVF clinic, if you're there and you're having fertility problems, the clinic could say, hey, while you're here, let's screen your embryos. Maybe you've got a family history of some genetic disease, and we'll see if we can figure out which embryos have it, and we won't put them in. That'll raise controversy about destruction of embryos. Some people won't like that because they still tiny people. Some in the disability movement are also going to say, hey, wait a minute. Are you throwing out embryos just because they're deaf? Well, there are plenty of people who have nice lives when they're deaf. They go to college at college. They, learn sign language, and they're fine. That's not a disease. It's kind of something that's a difference. But you can accommodate. And you can see where I'm going here. Who's to
Sure.
what the diseases are?
Right.
Somebody says, I'm an albino. Most Americans don't care. You trot that disease out, that test out in Japan, they're not ever having ultra white babies in Japan. That is not happening. That's a disease that they don't like. So, big fight right away. What are we screening for? What counts as a disease condition?
And where's the line?
And where's the line? And next step. While I'm in here, I noticed something else. If we pick this embryo with this genetic makeup, it's likely to be taller than that one. We like that? We don't like that? Not really a health state, not really a disease, but there are economic advantages to being at least a tall man, and there are definitely disadvantages to being a short man. You know that. And they're just cultural biases that are going to say taller is better. And so are we going to say, oh, yeah, well, let's, test for that, and we'll throw out all the shorties. And I'm not talking about dwarfism or anything like that. I'm talking about just on the short end of the height spectrum, 5'5", 5'6". Nope, don't want that anymore. And where we go next is, I'm fertile. I don't need the in vitro clinic. I don't have to make embryos in dishes and put them back in. But you know what? It'd be so interesting to get a healthy baby or to have a baby with more desirable, quote unquote, traits. I'm going to use that way to make my kids. We'll reserve sex for fun and games, but we're not doing that to make kids anymore because we would like to really start to determine the health, traits, whatever. And for those who can remember this far back, I've now gotten us to Gattaca and Revenge of Khan from the Star Trek movies. We're in eugenics land. And I think that's exactly where this technology is going to go. I think right now, probably health, probably just restricted to the people who are using in vitro fertilization at a clinic because they can't make a baby the other way. Pretty soon the clinics are going to start advertising and say, hey, you could make a baby in the backseat of a car, but let me tell you something. A better way to go is come down to Art Caplan's, reproductive clinic and give us your sperm and eggs and we'll brew them up and we'll see what the quote unquote best baby is. So that is the news that I think got neglected this year. That announcement is going to be reverberating around in all society. I mean, imagine you're in Singapore where they give incentives to people who are smart to have more kids. They may even say you have to have kids this way.
And it brings us kind of full circle because the woman who wanted an abortion was told her fetus wasn't viable. If she had it screened prior, she may have known that ahead of time, and things might have been a lot different on her story. So, yeah, I mean, I can see how all this stuff intertwines.
Yeah, I tried to point out gently in the abortion debate, the more you let the government and the state decide whether or not you can have a baby, the more you open the door to government interference through eugenics. Because they may wind up saying, hey, you know what? We're in charge here. We said you couldn't have an abortion for a kid you didn't want, but those disabled kids are pretty expensive. Let's make sure that everybody has a kid in a way that minimizes that cost. So you got to get a license.
And what if insurers started concerning themselves with that? I don't think that insurers are necessarily inherently evil. I quite like mine, but they could say, well, you have the BRCA gene.
Yep.
And to such an extent that any baby you have will have this percentage of really costing us a lot. They're not going to pay your bills for having your baby. I mean, it's possible.
One other path. So you guys and me don't know this quite as much as women over 35, but women over 35 usually are expected to get a test for Down syndrome when they get pregnant. It's kind of become routine. Is there a law that they have to do that? No. Does the insurance company say they have to do that? No. The culture wound up saying, well, what kind of irresponsible person wouldn't at least get tested? Didn't say you had to end the pregnancy, but if you get tested and it's positive, I will tell you about 80% of those pregnancies get aborted. Mm-hmm. So it could just be culture. Like, why are you having a kid with a disability when it could have been prevented? I'm not paying for that.
Exactly. And I, John, to your earlier point, I don't think it's necessarily insurance being the big evil boogeyman, although a lot of them are. But all it has to do is an insurance company saying, I won't pay for that. You can go ahead and have that baby, and you can have the inherent cost. We're just not going to cover those. And that's how insurance wields a lot of its power is, we're not going to pay for anything involved in the birth of that child, and that is a huge expense.
I can hear the metaphors now. You want to sail in a boat that has a big hole in it? You can do that. We're just not insuring it.
Yeah.
Well, Art Caplan, as usual, much food for thought. It's been an amazing year in your arena, but it's always an amazing year in your arena.
It's true.
Because you're at the cutting edge of so many issues that are taking us into the near future. And I hope you will come again on our show. We have you, 3 or 4 times a year because that's the way it's been.
Pace has been crazy. And in a weird way, we invested in science through the National Institutes of Health, given a lot of tax breaks to foundations and companies to support research, and you see it pays off.
Well, thanks again. Have a happy holiday.
Bye now.
Bye, Art.
And thank you for listening to the Musical Innertube. Our lovely little podcast is available everywhere good podcasts are found. Listen on your favorite platform, and if you like what you hear, please give us a good rating.
And spread the word. Tell your friends about the Innertube and let them know they can subscribe to the podcast on our website, musicalinnertube.com.
There you can listen to all of our podcasts, see pictures and biographies of our guests, and contact us. You can even click on the microphone button in the lower right corner to leave us a voicemail.
And don't forget to leave your email address on our Talk to the Tube page so we can stay in touch.
And you can email us directly at musicalinnertube@gmail.com.
And as always, thanks to virtual band Car Radio Dog for our theme music.